reflective state of awareness is like a mirror. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't have the engagement of that what is represented by Kriya Shakti. One remains in the purity of that what is represented by Iksha Shakti. But of course, we all experience that, but only fleetingly. And then there's a habitual propensity that now things need to make sense. I can't just cognize or perceive purely for what it is. But in meditative practices, and when we transcend, we're sometimes thrown into these states, at times for a prolonged time. You know, it's walking around a bit dumb, it's that. But how can I be dumb like that? Must be something wrong with me. So there's some like faint thought comes in and already it starts to recede. Well, if I'm thinking I'm dumb, I may be not that dumb. So I'm going to sharpen up my act.
Hello.
Hello.
So I was wondering on the path to self-mastery and in relation to the master's program, could the 5 pure Tattvas work or function as like the foundation blocks on that path to mastery, but not as like a rigid system, but as you mentioned before, where it's something alive. And then we've been talking a lot about the qualities of like discipline, structure, and perhaps stillness, but I feel there are some other qualities which would be interesting to reflect on and how they would relate to mastery, like humor and play, the sense of play, and experimentation. And then especially in relation to working creatively and in a playful manner with the opposing forces that kind of like this experience presents to us. And in the spirit of this Leela, the divine play, this playfulness, this wonder, and the childlike innocence. So I was wondering how that stands in correlation to that.
Well, I think really what we need to simply maybe have the understanding that we can't teach these qualities that you just mentioned in a sense of humor, right? This playful creative response, this childlike, right, spontaneous manner of being. It's kind of like we all are inborn with that, but even kids play differently. Even if you observe kids from very small age, from toddlers to when they start to interact with each other, already you can see their characters there. You can see their characters, their personalities. These personalities will only become more and more actualized. But I've observed that over the years with our own children, with their friends, with these preschools and schools, how these qualities are more inborn, right? So really, if someone is just serious, let's say, right, have that serious demeanor, seriousness, maybe this kind of, it would just simply need to be seen if this used in a such way, skillfully, fully accepted, that it becomes an assistance in every way to what, let's say, this entails. But Leela, by definition, already plays itself. So I want to make this maybe little adjustment. We don't play Leela. We are play of consciousness. So it plays through us. We simply play these roles. Some of us know it more acutely, others less. Sometimes we step in and out of the role in a sense of we are aware, and we then kind of become more oblivious to that, and the mundane consciousness takes over, and we simply take it all for seemingly what it is, when in fact it is not. So tomorrow, for example, I'd like us to speak about, as a kind of like culminating discourse on correlation of samavesha in terms of this possession into the divine consciousness, as well as performance. So this will be a challenge, a creative kind of enterprise, creative challenge to see how we can correlate that. So you started with the 5 pure tattvas. They're always intact, and this is the mystery in them. This is what really here is like. We acknowledge that the power of Maya is so enchanting, and no one can escape it. Absolutely everyone is. Everyone is in that. So even Adi Shankara, who was, let's say, Advaitin in a sense, he was acknowledging how that the power of Maya Shakti, Maya is holding everything and everyone intact, because that's the way the creation can function. That's how manifestation can be carried out. Without that, it cannot. So it's like certain requirements needed for theater. Today, cinema. There's too much light from the windows. You won't be able to see the screen. Can you work on a computer when the sun is right behind you, bleaching the screen? No, cannot. No, we need to dim the room, right? The curtains open, spotlight, and it becomes something there. So this, in a way, how everything is filtered, funneled, for it to become this kind of skillful artifice, but it's not. Because it's artificial in a sense of what is real. You see, this is also how we can view Maya, from that additional, maybe aesthetic, giving aesthetic spin on that. This artifice also is where the difference between an object of nature, which is just as phenomenal, extraordinary, and charged maybe with these qualities, but only when we take it outside of nature's context. I've done it many times myself. Even going back as far as early 90s, when living in England, I would go to London, go down to Saltdean, and known for these white hills, right? Chalky white hills. It's just half an hour drive from Brighton along the sea. And they will have a lot of this flintstone, which in England used in abundance of the years, that flintstone used as a building material. So there was, you know what flintstone is, right? It's of volcanic origin. Flintstones is literally as this lava was spewing and immediately covered by ashes or whatever, and then all that is turned into chalk. So some of these stone formations, they actually liquid in shape. We still have one in a box in our storage as an artifact that I kept over the years, because it's just, to me, looks like some kind of, I don't know, it has these female forms. It could be sculpted somewhere in Africa in Paleolithic times, right? So, but when you are there are these stones laying around everywhere, these chalk cliffs. But only when you take it from that context of nature and bring it into the environment of your house, into environment which is different other than nature, it's suddenly getting this different dimension. So there was even this movement in arts at some point where these artists went out into nature, like Andy Goldsworthy, remember that name? He did a lot of work in nature that kind of returned back to nature. See? Like you can't buy it because, that. But Richard Long, for example, brought it into the context of the gallery. Just like bringing a truck of rocks and just laying it out in the coolest gallery. Just rocks, and he will lay them in a certain way, and that's art. And of course it looks aesthetically arresting. So yeah, okay, what's the price tag? Yeah, I'm going to put it into my minimalist house. It will work very well there. So this aspect of artifice, you see, this also is there, recognized by discerning eye, by the eye of the with the eye of the discernment. We even can recognize our own artificial, I'm not using this attentively, responses. We know which responses are authentic and which ones are more like a kind of a not a drama, the tantrum thrown by the, drama queen, right? And it's like, oh wow, where's that come from? See, and we know that there's an authentic response versus something that is like kind of. So I don't know where we're going with that, except that we need to have this clear understanding that Leela, as play of consciousness, right? This is something that already plays itself, and we are that play of consciousness. Yes, in the Indian tradition, they have this used in terms of Maya remains binding, bringing, let's say, suffering, bringing sense of discontent, until Maya then seen for what it is. And from there on, it's no longer Maya. It is Leela. It is the same thing. Nothing changed. What changed is simply our understanding and seeing through the artifice of that. You see? Seeing through the artifice of that. This is why I wanted to illustrate this with that example of, in the arts, aesthetically pleasing object. You can sit on a pebble and just to pick a pebble, but there are millions of these pebbles, and you chuck it back into the pebbles. But I'll take it home, and then you put it on, coffee table, and it's just like, yeah. So this, of course, cannot be dodged. It cannot be just now, I'm seeing through Maya. I'm playing Leela. Just as long as we don't really fantasize about that. And therefore, if you have noticed already, I prefer that example with the method acting, the authenticity of our purpose, the authenticity of what we carry through in terms of being here fully present. And that in itself is, to me, comparable to that method acting. So the method acting here is to such degree that we truly believe that we are that character, right? So, and then of course the skills is to see that this character for what it is, whilst knowing you would have to carry on playing this character with as much grace, with as much verve. Now when you see people who tired play their characters, they kind of like lose purpose. You see, this is also a form of that, as something charged here, aesthetically. Aesthetics here taken outside of likes and dislikes. We speaking about it with this additional understanding of the value that the term aesthetics here represents. I am personally here speaking from the perspective how it is, let's say, configured into the work of Kashmir Shaivism, particularly through the influence of Abhinavagupta, right, which is the real novel purpose and incentive behind the chamatkara as the hidden path that just introduces that there. But with regard to the 5 primal forces, they're always at work, always. And of course, this is where we rise above Maya, or when we see through the Maya, when we recognize that these forces act at all times, and these forces, they are, in fact, what charges everything. Every time we will something, it's charged by that. Every time we act, it is because there is knowledge that precedes that. So therefore there's seamless translation, seamless unfoldment from, let's say, that awareness and immediately followed by bliss. Awareness, bliss. We could speak about it now. Awareness, bliss, consciousness, or being, consciousness, bliss, Satchitananda. Doesn't matter now. Let's not quibble where we slide bliss for this moment. We can speak about it again to revisit that, what Satchitananda represents in the full scope of Indian spirituality, irrespective of traditions. It is accepted as such, substratum. So here, Shaivites simply give another spin of that, because they don't deal with just the trinity of that, what then in Hindu will become Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshvara, right? Well, we have the 5, right? And it's for the reason why there are 5, because it's carried these actions, right? The 5 actions of Shiva here. The 3, those canonical, that became canonical, right? The aspect of creation, the aspect of preservation, the aspect of dissolution. And then the aspect that conceals itself in reality of experience, and grace revealing aspect. So these 5 faces of Shiva. So all this is always intact. All this is always intact. And likewise, this understanding eventually brings about the possibility, providing, of course, there's enough movement in consciousness as such. There's enough movement when we can recognize and begin to experience this in relation to what we speak about, the upayas. We haven't spoken about the upayas, but you've been in the previous immersions, and we spoke about it in great detail. So this is always intact, always. Why we only bound to, let's say, experience everything only at the level of Kriya Shakti, expression of Kriya Shakti. Simply because here the velocity is not enough. And for one way or another, somehow this is where experience misses those points when before subject-object dynamic begin to come forth. And when it is missed repeatedly, it's simply habit formed. You see? So in a way, in Kashmir Shaivism, there is this understanding that one can reverse that habit by introducing another habit. Do you see what I'm saying here? So another habit before the dynamic of subject and object. So of course, for that, some finer frequencies, velocity, speed is required. So when we are in the mode of perception, which is yet not ridden by subject-object, then it is spoken of as instantaneous. And in that mode of perception, the mental apparatus, the mind, has no use and no place yet, because mind can only function when some pendulum is got into the motion. Before that, mind cannot function. It needs subject-object. We all need to understand this. Mind needs subject-object. So when our mode of perception and cognition is fast enough, we are in that state beyond subject-object dynamic. And that is the highest of applicable upayas, the highest of the means. This is because it is empowered by Iksha Shakti. You see? So you can see that Iksha Shakti is always at work. But blink of a moment, and the next moment, already it translates into the domain of means of knowledge. So already in another domain, the Jnana Shakti. And the Jnana Shakti is already the construction. The construction that already begins the split and presupposes the split. It brings the split about, but it is not complete yet. That split is complete only when it lands on the following aspect represented by Kriya Shakti. And now we have it. See? Now we have it. We are in the domain of subject, object, whatever that is. Thought or a direct perception of something through the senses. So it is a training, and that's what we will be doing in the program itself, so that we can become and gain some mastery in that, because that in itself is crucial to lead others, because we can lead ourselves. We can, as it were, restrain the bridles of the mind at will when we fall in purely contemplative, reflective state of awareness. Reflective state of awareness is like a mirror. It doesn't do anything. It doesn't have the engagement of that what is represented by Kriya Shakti. One remains in the purity of that what is represented by Iksha Shakti. But of course, we all experience that, but only fleetingly. And then there's a habitual propensity that now things need to make sense. I can't just cognize or perceive purely for what it is. But in meditative practices, and when we transcend, we are sometimes thrown into these states, at times for a prolonged time. You know, it's walking around a bit dumb, it's that. But how can I be dumb like that? Must be something wrong with me. So there's some like faint thought comes in, and already it starts to recede. Well, if I'm thinking I'm dumb, I may be not that dumb, so I'm going to sharpen up my act. It's like that. It's what falling into the gaps. You know, when you fall into the gap, you think, oh my God, I'm becoming senile. It's an onset of dementia. I need to start taking some, I need to start making exercises. Maybe I should walk around and repeat something. Oh my, because we overpraise the activity of the mind. We're overdependent. But it's been said already many times, great thinkers, right, have to be great also contemplatives, because you cannot bring to the surface of thought something profound unless you can remain without thought for a while. It's as simple as that. That's the reality of the situation. And the mechanics, of course, in that how it interacts here. For example, when bliss is intense, we remain above all upayas. We remain in the highest upaya. And bliss completely takes over. It incapacitates us, because we can see that in the structure of consciousness. Why? Because awareness, bliss, it's Shiva Shakti. We are in a state of that scintillating awareness of Shiva Shakti, where bliss dominates. In that state, all mental activity ceases, and there is not even perception or cognition. It's just bliss. And this needs to be cherished, nourished, and also, dare I say, it's accumulatable. That's what's extraordinary about that. Why? It is accumulatable because just as our body, our memories is not stored just in some brain cortexes. Yes, that to a large degree. Everyone knows today, hopefully, that the whole entire body carries memory. This is where the memory is also stored. There are schools of psychology that also mix this with alternative practices and doubled with the understandings in neuroscience, how parts of the body are corresponding to particular memories. See? So likewise, the cellular structure remembers that, how pleasant it is to be in that bliss, how like literally dissolving in in ether is very nice. That, right? So it carries that memory within itself.